Kia ora mai tātou, ki te hunga tiaki e taitinana mai ki tēnei huihuinga, nei rā te mihi kia koutou. E hoa atu te toko kia tātou nei kaumātua, rāko te ora, e tuku ngā whakamorimiti ki te kaihanga. Nei rā, tēnā koe e koro.
Kia ora tātou I te atanei. Ko ngā mea hara mai ki te tautoko I tā mātou mai te rā horoi. Te huakina mai te whare o toi mahara. Nei rā taku mihi. Kia tātou I tai atu ki reira. No reira ngā mihi nui kia tātou. Huakina e ngā atu e ngā tūpuna ngā tātou mo tēnei o tātou kaupapa. Tomo mai ki mua, ki muri, ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho, ki o mātou taha. Arahine ia mātou I roto I tēnei hui mai te timatatanga ki te motunga. Ko koutou rā te ringaringa arahi mo mātou. Ta mārama tia ho mai ki ringi a mātou mai te timatatanga o tēnei hui. Taino atu ki te motunga ake, āmene. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe e koro. Extend my acknowledgements to our elected members, rangatira of our kaunihira, our kaiwhiriwhiri, our democratic services staff and managers that are here to support our hui this morning. And most importantly, I acknowledge our manuhiri that are here to address our hui this morning. I have apologies from the Chief Executive, Darren Edwards, and I just would like to note that Huriwai Paki is unwell and is hoping to join us online. So I'd like to just record that, please, and if he joins us, we'll welcome him into the hui. I assume that everybody is in receipt of our rarangitake, our agenda, and our reports for today's meeting. So can I please extend a welcome to Hamaima, Rangi Topiora, and Heneti Buick. I extend my invitation to you to address Te Whakaminenga. If you come forward to the chairs in front of you, and we'll receive your take.
Oh, what's that mean now? Oh, okay. Oh, morena. Kia ora, Andre. Kia ora koutou e te whānau. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. My name is Hemaima Kakikwedamu. Ngāti raukua ki te tonga. I'm here because I sent a letter to Whakaminenga and the chairperson of Ngā Hapu Otaki in regards to a Labour Day in Otaki Beach, where my daughter and I witnessed about the Otaki Beach being used as a car park. And when I say that, we were shocked at the number of people abusing this resource, this tonga of ours. We counted about 20 cars from the surf club in Otaki to Waituhu, the mouth of Waituhu River, and then cars beyond that. So what shocked us is that no one takes any notice of the signpost, which is clearly there for everyone to see. I think there's a sign that says, "Don't be an egg." Well, everyone was an egg that day with their cars and their trailer bikes and quad bikes around our sand dunes and ignoring families and children on the beach. I know this issue has been brought up before with community and here at council. I've talked to a number of people at home who are involved in the environment in various positions locally and within council themselves. The thing is, this is ongoing. There is no way in which to police this, I imagine. There's a lack of enforcement. There, like I spoke to some of the local residents, Libby Hakarai, who was on the beach that day trying to ring the police, but was told that she couldn't get hold of police. She had to, her call was sent to a police central call station. So there's no access to get authority there. We have no authority. We don't want to be in argument with strangers on the beach, and some of us do get into those situations. The danger is people are also drinking, and you know, it could turn nasty. The decision my daughter and I made when we were there was not to engage with these people, and there were lots of them, but to really observe what they were doing. And it is total sense of privilege and ownership of an environment that they actually have no connection to. So all of us who have grown up in Ōtaki all along this coast have connection, whether you're manawhenua or not, to the resources, to the beach, to the ocean. And we are very aware of the taonga that is there. And the pipi beds, which would be in deprivation if this carries on. The fishing. Now, I will say that there were fishermen there, and they're responsible. They're local fishermen. They park their cars up, they go out to fish. They don't take their truck or their four-wheel drive and park it by the shore and fish from their boot with a few beers, which we saw a lot of that happening. So there's a distinction between local fishermen and then people who are abusing our taonga, basically. It's, you know, I talk about it as a resource, I talk about it as a taonga. And it's a place where all along this coast people have grown up with that natural beauty available to them because we've cared for it in the past. We want to care for it now and into the future. Otherwise, we're not going to have anything there. And when I say have anything there, what I mean by that is those pipi beds are going to disappear because they move up and down that coastline around Ōtaki. The fishing is going to probably be depleted. The sand dunes already are depleted. There are beautiful plantings of pēngao, and the Sand Dune Community Group have done amazing work down near Waituhu. Before, I was going to think, oh yes, the thing is, I wanted to speak here and how can, as manawhenua, can we work with the council to address what I'm saying? There is a wider group, wider community who wants to be involved, like the Sand Dune Group, other residents along the beachfront, and just people who are fed up with strangers actually just abusing the place where we go regularly. Anything else? One more point.
Kia ora. Just in listening to Mum, and a point came to me was, in terms of the sand dune restoration, it's good to note some of the research done by Takutai Kāpiti in their report was the sand dunes help with climate resilience. And the day that we were there, we saw, I think, about 4 or 5 quad bikes hooning up and down the sand dunes, damaging the pēngao. So it's not just the nesting beds and the bird beds, but it also hinders our ability in the restoration efforts towards climate resilience. So it's a huge amounts of money been put into that resource to establish safety for the community, and all of that is undone in the space of one summer. Sometimes you can really erode the sand dunes backwards to the point where you're starting from scratch if it's not addressed ASAP.
Any more? That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Tēnā kōrua, hamaima, kōrangi, topi ora. I just want to acknowledge that we are in receipt of your letter this morning, which clearly outlines what you have shared with us. I'll ask the meeting if there are any questions or points for further clarification that that those at the hui this morning would like to ask. So I'll open up to the meeting to ask any questions or seek any further clarification regarding this take.
Is that me? Oh, I'm on. Kia ora koutou. Just on, you said working together with council. Do you have any ideas of what you would like to see? Like if someone came to you and said, what do you see manawhenua's role being, and what do you want the council to do to help manawhenua or work together with council? What would be your wish list? What would you want to see?
I'd like to see a specific action group of manawhenua, of community with council, specifically on this issue, because it's, like Topiora said, it's a very damaging thing, what we're witnessing. And that was just one day that we saw this situation. Is that enough? Yeah. Anything else?
I think also I think when looking at some of the signage and what information is out there, it might be worth taking more of an educational approach to the taonga that is our coastline, so that visitors who are there are aware of the different species that live there, the action plan and the efforts. There are some signage, especially along Waitahu, around that mouth. There are efforts that kind of indicate the restoration and what's happened there. But when you go down there and you're looking at what's put on display, there's no information that tells the community or visitors what they're actually working with and where they actually are, and the kind of taonga that is there as Otaki Beach. And whatever signage is there is quite badly damaged, so maybe a repair in some of that. There's a lot of, you can't really read a lot of it, and it's small. Yeah.
So I just realised something I didn't mention, and we at Ngā Hapu have talked about this a lot, and that is the freedom camping. And the situation, extends down to Otaki River mouth. I think there's a sign there that says 6 vehicles overnight.
2 nights at night.
2 nights. So how many we've counted? 20 or 10 to 20, yeah.
There's never ever less than 6 down there, as far as I'm aware. Very rarely do you see clear enough of less than 6 vehicles. And the other thing is the signage is maybe slightly bigger than an A3 piece of paper. It sits to the side. It's the only sign that's there. Also, getting back to the signage issue, the same with down by where the boat access, towards the other end by Waitahu, where the boat access is. That's the access that a lot of people are using to get onto the beach. There's one bit of signage that's not much bigger than an A2 piece of paper maybe, and that notes the bylaw that it's $150 fine if you're not there with boat access intentionally, which means that the one day that I was there were over 20 cars, and like Mum said, about 20 cars, none of them had boats with them, and it's $150 fine. So if every one of them paid the fine, we might be able to afford monitoring and efforts towards restoration a bit better.
I just want to pick up on that point. Can I respond? Is that we do need actually people on the ground. Yeah, manawhenua on the ground to monitor this. Yeah, not one person can do it. You need a team of people.
Councillor go forward and then Councillor Ko. Kia ora
Oh,
kōrua.
Councillor Co's come red. She's... Oh, sorry. Well, thanks for coming in this morning. Yes, I've been fairly proactive with the Friends of the Otaki River and the action group for Waitanahua, and I'm really disturbed to hear that there are quad bikes on the sand dunes. A lot of work goes into that, the restoration of those. Children play around there, and to hear that people are drinking as well on the beach there, and it's not just Labour Day, it's an ongoing thing. And I think you're right, we need to enforce the fines and get some sort of warden control there to, just stop them. Totally in sympathy with you, and yes, we do need some action. Thank you.
Look, I'm right there with you. I live at Tohoro Beach and we have exactly the same issue there. We have attempted, well, you would have noticed last year we tried to put barriers in. The response from the community is that they try to move the barriers, they destroy the signs, and they say, this is part of our personal freedom to enjoy the beach. We moved here from the city, so we could basically do what we like in the environment at the beach. So it's a very difficult issue. I'm just wondering how you would propose to stop the vandalism of signs and how you would police it. It's really, really hard. So if you have any suggestions in that line, I would love to hear them because, it's heartbreaking to see, and especially when they're driving amongst little children on the beach. And setting fire to the driftwood as they did at Labour Weekend at Tohoro Beach. We had the fire brigade called out. It's a terrible problem. So yes, my question is, how would you stop the vandalism and the defiance and police it? Because it's just not easy.
I think it maybe goes back to Mum's point about having people on the ground. But Tūhoro might be slightly different. I know that in Otaki, there's a sense of helplessness for a lot of the community. You don't feel empowered to kind of engage, and there's also not a lot of education. So when we're talking about city goers moving into the country, they don't know what they have, and they don't understand the kind of taonga they're engaging with. And I wonder if it's more about establishing avenues of education and information where new residents and old residents can have a better understanding of what they're actually engaging with and how and where their behaviour is causing the kind of damage that it's causing. And that's sort of, maybe it might not be signage as such, it's more where and how do our community get exposed to an understanding of what's actually there. And signage is just one example, but it might be having a bit more manpower on the ground to do the work, to engage with the community at a face-to-face sort of value. It was tricky, because I was there with my mum, I kept my mouth shut. Otherwise, I would have been approaching some of these whānau. Not aggressively, but hello, where are you from? What do you do? Oh, well, this, do you know where you're at? And it's different for me because in some of my previous work, that was part of my job, was community facing and engaging with people on the environment and what is there. But it's a community conversation. And what I'm seeing in Otaki in particular is the community don't get to have these conversations.
Yep.
And we saw it in some of the responses to the letter that Mum sent out, because it went quite widely for our community, was that people are like, yes, I'm aware of it, and yes, I know, but you don't know how to speak to it. And when you are dealing with drinkers and people from the city, and I had training on how to engage with people like that. It's a training course on how to kōrero with people who are coming at you from a very different perspective with a very different lens, and you're trying to gently ear them and broaden their awareness with a bit more, with a friendly way about it, I guess. But I would say it starts with manpower on the ground and community work and education.
Because I think part of the problem is a lot of these people come from out of the area,
Yeah.
so it's really hard to educate them or communicate with them. 'Cause
Yeah.
you just have to be there on the spot when they are.
Yeah, so you
when
need
they're
you
doing the
do you
wrong
need you
thing.
need more money, and I also think it's, you know, and some of my whanaunga might agree with this. Manawhenua have a lot to say and do about where and how those conversations take place and what they can look like, and that can be really powerful as well. So I think it starts with the community. If people are coming from out of town, there are different ways to access the information that they might need. It might be, I mean, I think about all the events on Otaki Beach, like the kite festival. It could be a really big opportunity to educate people on where they actually are and what they're about. I would look at some of those events at Te Horo and look where you might be able to engage people that way, and then having signage and posting in places they do visit, like local petrol stations. If they're drinkers, well,
Yeah.
who's at the bottle
Bottle
stores?
store.
Yeah, that sort of stuff.
I think engagement with people, like you can get online systems that you can look at, but the fact is it actually is something you read or you're bored with reading. So it is a face-to-face kōrero, I think, and it is about the community coming together. So I say that clearly with ideas of maybe we need to have set meetings with community. So where would those meetings be? That's one. I don't think it would be at a memorial hall. It needs to be at a surf club because they're there. The surf club in Otaki see everything when they're working. So there are places, if we're going to have engagement, and we need to, with our community, with manawhenua, with who's there, needs to be on site as best we can. Kia ora. You got something to say?
Councillor Halliday.
Oh, just waiting. You wanted to say something else?
You first, Councillor.
Oh, look, thank you very much for coming in. Just one question, really. No due disrespect to manawhenua, but I'm just curious to know if you've got a relationship with the local community board up there, because they're a very proactive group up there, and having them in your corner would be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
You have? Okay, thank you.
What was I going to say?
I don't know.
Thank you so much for coming along today. I agree this is a serious issue. It's also in Waikanae. It's also in Paraparumu. It's right along the coast, and it's an ongoing issue that we face. Every time we do a beach bylaw review, we get submissions from people saying they have a right to drive on the beach and we don't have a right to stop them. But just Googling it quickly, I came across New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement guidance notes that have been released by DOC. They've been around for quite a while, but they're still really relevant. And I'm just wondering, where's DOC in all this? Because it's a conservation issue as well. And also police. Could you reiterate what happened when you tried to involve the police? Because according to this guidance note, it's their responsibility to enforce bylaws. It's our responsibility too. But I mean, ideally, you don't want it to get to that. But if it does, then
I think with DOC in particular, I know that a number of their portfolios they've had to sort of relinquish or hand back over to manawhenua because they don't have the resourcing to manage them the way they want to. And I know that with police, I'm not speaking firsthand because our whanaunga who had that experience, when she made calls to the police, because it wasn't an emergency, it wasn't at the priority of their list. So when she was sent back to the central call centre, that's not based in Otaki or even in the Kāpiti coast or in Wellington. So you're speaking to someone in an office or someone in a call centre who has no context to the distress that behaviour is actually causing. And so again, it drops further down on the priority list. It's a systemic problem, I would say. I was thinking about just going back to your query about what can be done for because a lot of these people are holiday goers and maybe they're not from there. So it might be also looking at, or I don't know how, but I'm thinking of Airbnb and some of those online batch booking websites and where and how we get exposure that way as well might be an option. I know that a lot of the holiday goers, they're staying at Airbnbs that don't have that kind of information, or some of these landlords don't have that. So that might be something to look at. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming along today, and some great ideas coming out of this discussion about how we can get this message out ahead of what's going to be, as you said before, a really busy summer. Thank you.
Yep, right, good
Yeah,
point.
kia ora, me again, sorry.
That's right.
Thanks again for coming along. Can I make a suggestion? I was going to discuss this with the council, but you've asked for our help, and I think we will be proactive. Can I make a suggestion in the interim that you don't get into a conversation with them, especially if they've been drinking? Could you take their registration numbers, drop them off at 269 Mill Road, that's the vet clinic there, and we'll just get a list off them, and we'll see what we can do in the interim, okay? But we'll try and be proactive.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming in. I know it's a really big concern.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
I just want to acknowledge we have Huriwai and Deanna online, so can I just ask both of you independently if you have any questions or any comments that you would like to contribute towards our discussion. Huriwai, kōrero mai?
No, nothing from my end. Sorry, I came in partway through the conversation, so wasn't able to actually hear the full kōrero to comment. But following everyone's comments about the concerns that are being raised out in for the whānau out in Otaki, and as well as the wider community, and just keen to find ways of how we can work together to find a solution.
Kia ora e hoa, thank you. Deanna,
Tēnā tātou. Ai, tautoko ana te kōrero o Huriwai. From our perspective, sitting within council and the iwi partnerships team, we would be keen to help find some solutions working with manawhenua and community. Tēnā tātou.
perhaps if I can try and summarise where we've landed. I'm happy that we've been able to identify those within the Otaki community that have registered their interest in getting together and having a kōrero about this. And I did wonder, Hamaima, where would be the appropriate place to have that conversation. So happy to be directed through you and those of our organisations at home that have registered an interest. I'm mindful of the responsibility that we inherit as manawhenua. Our role as kaitaki. I think about the rāhui that we placed on our toheroa, our tohimanga. Again, because of the fear that we would not have a future where we could go and gather tohimanga, and we haven't done that now for probably more than 10 years or so. I think like many that occupy the coast in Otaki, we've seen changes in the behaviour of our pipi beds. I can testify as a frequent beach lover in the summer of people arriving in Otaki, as they do across the district, who enjoy coming here with their children, and I've often witnessed people taking the liberty of bringing their vehicles onto the beach, known to ask them to leave for the very reasons that you've outlined, is really for the safety and protection not only of our kaimona, but at times for our children that are populating the beach, who should be able to enjoy that environment, that taio and safety. And so I'm acknowledging the strength of your advocacy here today, and note with a great deal of respect the need to address this. The council does have a role to play here, and so do police, and so do kāwanatanga. And so I think Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti have a responsibility to have a conversation about the protocols that are currently in place, that that are under the authority and auspices of the local authority. And I think we also need to generate a conversation with police who we rely upon to take care of that that motorway on the sand. That's their jurisdiction. I think also te papaatawhai being mentioned means that we also need to be prepared to have a talk to them. They have a role to play here as well, alongside those individuals of the community that take care of the taio. So in partnership, I think there's good reason to meet and at a local level to address what we can to protect and maintain the safety of our beach. In past years, we have relied on honorary fishing officers to police and monitor those who use that space. And I know from personal experience that has been an overwhelming responsibility inherited by many of our own people across this entire rohe of the three iwi. So monitoring those sacred places is fundamental to us reaching an agreement on a strategy on how we mitigate the risks that you have highlighted. There has in the past been suggestions that our people erect manawhenua so that there's also a clear marker about the distinction of those sacred areas that we have responsibility for as manawhenua. I think those types of conversations deserve further reflection. But I agree that there's an educational component here that we should exercise immediately. And so I acknowledge your time and acknowledge how you've informed this meeting about the concerns that obviously are experienced across the district of Kāpiti. And I think there's some value in te Whakaminenga responding in a manner that provides for our hapu and our iwi to consider their approach collectively as the Art Confederation and in partnership with our council and in partnership with Kāwanatanga. So tēnei taku mihinui kia kōrua. Koutou mā e putu atu o koutou nei whakaaro rangatira o enei kaupapa nunui. Thank you.
Kia ora.
You're welcome to stay unless you're heading out to the beach. We are going to welcome Henity Buick to our meeting, Hamaime and Rangi Kopiora. So if you need to leave us, we'll just ask Henity when she concludes her address to the Whakaminenga to sing the song on your behalf.
Thank you, Henity.
Henity joins us to share with us Te Puna Oranga o Otaki annual report. It's the first annual report that has been published. So I want to welcome you to our hui, Henity, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And we're looking forward to receiving a summary of the 10-page report that you've published.
A me mihi tuatahi kia koe korodon nau I tūwhiri o tō tātou hui e tātou nei. Kia koe Andre, te tia mana o tēnei rupu. O tira kia tātou katoa kua tai mai ki tēnei hui. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Henity. I'm the General Manager for Te Puna Oranga o Otaki, a community health provider based in Otaki and driven by Otaki for Otaki. Yes, so Andre is correct. We had our inaugural AGM a couple of weeks back, and happy to share that the AGM on our website shortly. I have provided Andre with the first round of the copies. So basically, in summary, Te Puna Oranga Otaki is governed by our governance team, separated by myself as a general manager, and then 4 operating arms under my leadership. So we have clinical services, which drove the COVID response in partnership with Ngā Hapu Otaki and Kia ora Otaki. We have social services and youth services, which is predominantly our NEET program for rangatahi looking for education, employment or training, as well as pastoral care to help keep them in education, employment or training. We have a new position or new contracts coming with the Kāora Ka Ako Lunches in Schools program, and that sits under our food sovereignty arm, our food security arm within Te Punaoranga o Otaki. So it's a wraparound service trying to collaborate ministries on the ground and at ministry level so that we can support whānau in a holistic way and not just in isolation of one concern. So we also have attendance advisor within our team who links us with those hard to reach whānau, and once we're in with one whānau member, it's quite easy to get the rest, to help mum, to help dad, to help siblings into jobs and back into the community. So it's a really privileged position. I love what we do. We feel like since the COVID response that we've really built our social capital within Otaki, and the trust is quite big. Within our space and external to the space and within all our kura kaupapa Māori as well. I guess looking forward, our aspirations are only to grow, to support the community of Otaki, to have services driven by and for Otaki. So the next big thing for us is localities and the health, new health reform. So, and this is a question that doesn't have to be answered today, but it would be great to have some clarification around Council's involvement in the development of the Otaki locality plan. So, last year, Minister Peni Hinari approved Otaki to be its own locality, though it hasn't been formally approved or announced by Te Whatuora and Te Aka Whaiora. I believe that council have a prescribed role in the rollout of localities, and that the locality is actually iwi-led. So while council have their prescribed role, it's really important to have that transparency between the providers, ministries, council, and how are we working together, and what does that look like, and who's talking to Te Aka Whaiora, Te Whatuora, and it would just be good to clarify and be very clear on everybody's role so that we're not duplicating services or underrepresenting minorities or populations that need support the most. And unlike Jemima and Tops, I'm kind of here rogue and didn't come prepared or have a letter in advance. So I'm more than happy to take any questions. I cannot sing, my apologies. So that waiata tautoko might actually have to come from Andre. But yeah, so thank you all for listening to my quick summary of our AGM. It will be available on our website if you want to have a look further into what we're doing. And yeah, if you feel free to contact me directly if you're wanting to know more about what Te Punaoranga are doing and how we're going and kind of what's next on the radar. Other than that, ngā mihi.
Tēnā koe, Henity. Congratulations, firstly, on your appointment as the General Manager for Te Punaoranga Otaki. I do have an unautographed copy of the annual report, but I might ask if it's possible to request a copy of the annual reports to be distributed to Te Whakaminenga, and there may be interest in other elected members obtaining a copy, Henity. So could I just perhaps ask if that request could be acknowledged, and can I ask Hara for you to follow that up, or for your staff to follow that up? Are there any questions or any comments in relation to Henity's presentation this morning? Particularly interested in a view that might be expressed regarding the point you've raised regarding the locality plan, and what is the role that council could provide in order to complement the work that's going to happen there. And of course, we're all mindful that this is not just something that is that Ngā Hapu and Te Punaoranga Otaki is having to manage. This particular role is evidence in the work that's happening with Te Awa ki Whakarongo Tai and obviously with Rangi Tō Rangatira. So I welcome any questions and any comments regarding Henity's presentation this morning.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Henity, great to see you here. Look, health sort of sits under my sort of committee, but I just wanted to say that we've connected, and the reason I did that was because councils do need to be involved in this space. It's just we're not too sure how. and I think that mystery, shall we say, is fairly across the board. But as I said at the time, fully respect by Aotaki for Aotaki and how that looks. I think one of the questions coming up in today's agenda is potentially how from Te Whakaminenga we can approach that as such. But whatever happens, it needs to be open, needs to be transparent, and we need to be working together. And you certainly have my assurance that that's certainly the approach I'll be taking with regards to ensuring that is sort of hopefully the council approach. Well, it will be their council approach as well. Maybe Chris wants to comment on that one as well. But we're just waiting to really see what the current government, maybe what some direction we might be able to get from them. But very, very happy to be just working with you guys and being connected through your various committees there as well.
Oh, Henry, thanks for coming in. Yeah, congratulations for your first report, and youth in Aotaki are being well looked after. Is there a real big problem there with employment and their accommodation? And just with regard to the town planning aspects of the marae area, the sort of area in Mill Road there, Tasman Road. I understand that special provision has been made in Plan Change 2. However, with the new government, we're just going to see if they're going to repeal the Intensification Act, and perhaps personally I'm looking at some sort of grassroots sort of design system which comes from the village centres. So this is something I'm going to just roll out very shortly. But no, congratulations for the work you're doing.
Kia ora. Just to say, we are connected, and that it's very much our intention at this end to be working with the community and developing, I think, a view on a health strategy that's something that comes from the community up and helps to coordinate and I think bring the different parts of what we've started to call our health ecosystem together. In my mind, irrelevant as to what happens in the short term with the changes of an incoming government, because we need to have a view in our community on what is important to us. And I think having a common voice and agreement on priorities will put us in a stronger position going forward. So we're really glad to be connected, to be working with you. And we certainly won't be bringing anything to the table that we haven't connected with the community on. So I can definitely put that out there, and it will come back here. And we are talking about it shortly. So very glad to be doing that as well.
Awesome, ka pai. Just want to thank you for raising the point that regardless of a change in government, that whānau voice will lead what our whānau need. So Tiro here is one of the as our survey going through Otaki at the moment on what whānau see as a priority for us. Within the first month, we had 220 responses, which is pretty good for Otaki. We're still pushing it out further out there, especially into those deeper pockets that wouldn't usually fill out such a survey. But yeah, we actually have an open day today in Otaki, Halloween themed for child immunisation, all that. So that survey will be circulating at that time as well. So really cool to be here face to face. Looking forward to connecting in all health areas to ensure that the voice of manawhenua Otaki is heard in the development of such a strategy. Ngā mihi.
Nei rā te mihi. Thank you again for your helpful presentations to Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti this morning. I can see lots of note-taking happening, and so we'll generate a response to both individual kaupapa. So thank you all for coming to our hui this morning.
Kia ora koe.
Sorry, I'm not advised of any additional agenda items this morning, so we can go to item 5, page 6, confirmation of the previous minutes of Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti. Those minutes are found on page 7. Are there any matters arising from those minutes that aren't captured in today's agenda and reports? Are there any corrections? There are no amendments or corrections. I'd ask that we move and second the adoption of the minutes of 12 September 23. I move. Kim, thank you. Second. Janet, all in favour say aye. Contrary? Carried. Kia ora mai tātou. Yeah. Tēnā koe, Sophie. Would you like to join us at the table? Welcome you to our meeting. Item 6, reports, and 6.1, manawhenua and new strategy development. I want to acknowledge and welcome Gina and Chris. Who else? Anyone else? Need to acknowledge? Ka pai.
Kia ora. Today, I will hand over to Gina to just step me through slightly the conversation, but essentially we are coming to you with two things. One is to talk to you about 3 strategies that we have in development, which we are interested in working through how we'll engage. And I had put on the table, or we had put on the table, the word co-design. So we wanted to get in front of a document for consultation and actually work together on this mahi. So it was great just before to talk about the health strategy and how we're working in the community as well, because that's the intention. And the second thing is the Strategy Operations and Finance Committee have agreed to stand up a climate change and resilience community think tank. And in the terms of reference that is on the table, we're seeking representation from manawhenua to be on that think tank. So we want to talk about those points with you today, and ideally through the conversation, land an agreed way forward for both of those items. And I might just get Gina to provide a bit of detail around the three strategies and a bit around the think tank.
Sure, thanks Chris. Kia ora, Gina Anderson, I'm Strategy Manager and relatively new in the role, so great to be here and talking to you all. As Chris said, we've got three strategies that we're working on: the climate change and resilience strategy, the environment strategy, and the health strategy. So the climate change and resilience strategy, we have had discussions with Council and there is a keenness to move particularly quickly on that one, but we are obviously really mindful of the need to work with manawhenua as well. And the environment strategy kind of works alongside that, obviously a bit broader than climate change, and so again we're really keen to engage with you on that. And health is a relatively broad area for us, as Councillor Halliday mentioned. There is a role for us in the broad sense of the word. We do a lot in public health related matters. We're also looking at what we do related to health services, and we've leaned into that role, I think, in the last few years to look at how we can improve the health services here in Kāpiti. I think, as Chris said, we're really keen to understand from you what the priority is from manawhenua to engage and work with us on these strategies, and what the capacity is looking like at the moment to do that and how we might go about that. We're really keen to have that part of the conversation. And in addition to that, as Chris mentioned, we have a climate change and resilience community think tank that we've stood up. And we have space for 2 manawhenua representatives, so really keen to receive advice on who we can have join us on that group. Happy to receive questions, happy to have a conversation about what that looks like.
Tēnā koe, Gina. I think you did very well.
Thank you.
Could I ask if there are any questions or points for clarification before we have a look at the recommendations? Well, I'll take us directly then to taunakitanga recommendations. There are 3 recommendations. The first is that Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti note the contents of this report. The second recommendation, that Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti advises Council on manawhenua priority for involvement and collaboration on climate change and resilience strategy, the environmental strategy, and the health strategy. C, that Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti advises on manawhenua representation for the climate change and resilience community think tank, and there are 2 representatives that are being sought. Could I seek direction from the meeting, please, regarding those 3 recommendations? I would be prepared to conclude that, 1, we receiving the contents of the report, and I expect there will be further digestion of that. There is good reason to support recommendation B, to look at the priority for involvement and collaboration on those three, B1, B2, B3. I think it is helpful to understand, particularly with the health portfolio, how might that change with the incoming government, and there is definitely some nervousness right now regarding the future of Te Whatu Ora, Te Aka Whai Ora, and so that's something that we all should be acutely aware of, and it's about how do we strategize around that, and who do we rely on to inform us about how we might approach the potential disestablishment of those structures. Certainly, I think there's some value in us adopting an approach where we seek for manawhenua representation on the Climate Change and Resilience Community Think Tank as recommended. So unless there's anyone violently opposed to those recommendations, I'd be very comfortable to move that we adopt those. Do we have a seconder? Yeah. Recommendations A to C. If we get a seconder, we have a motion, we can then discuss and debate it.
I'll second.
Kōrero mai, Kim.
C, just the advice of manawhenua representation. So we'd have to go back and have a corridor about that. That's the only thing on C, rather than advise at this meeting. So if we could reword that, maybe. I don't know what we do there.
Yeah. Kia ora, Kim. I seek further direction on the qualification of that. I think what it's suggesting is, in principle, we would support having representation.
Okay. Yeah.
But I also appreciate there's a need for further consultation, and I imagine the Confederation representatives today would want to obtain, a comfort to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that can be reflected in recommendation C, and there's genuine agreement in taking that approach, I'm happy if our staff can reconstruct that to reflect that.
That covers it. Yeah.
Kia ora tātou. I'm just seeking some clarity around that point C from a manawhenua perspective. Is there anything that you may require from us at council to enable that manawhenua representation in terms of information on what it would consist of in terms of the positions?
Just around, I think because we've just seen the report, so once we digest that and understand what those representatives are going to be, then we'd be able to more effectively appoint someone that will fit that role. That's really all it is, just a bit of time. Yeah, and we may have to come back to get some kind of more questioning, but we won't probably know that until we actually go through it. But on the face of it, I mean, I don't see an issue with it, just allowing that time.
So I've asked our staff if they could just help us navigate, particularly recommendation C. There's obviously a need for manawhenua representatives to caucus and to look at their approach across the Confederation to have 2 appointments made. And I acknowledge what you're saying, Kim, about defining the role. So we're clear about that, the terms of reference. Those things, I'm sure, are going to be conversations that we need to generate across the Confederation. So we can obviously go and look for the appropriate people to occupy those roles on our behalf. There's just been an amendment to recommendation C. Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti will advise on manawhenua representation for the Climate Change and Resilience Committee think tank. And obviously we're looking at 2 representatives that will be seeking to fill those positions. Does that feel comfortable to make that amendment to recommendation C?
I mean, do you want to do the same for B in terms of will advise?
Okay. Yep. And we're just going to modify recommendation B to include will advise. Okay.
Yep, let's go to play.
You happy with those amendments?
Yeah,
Kim?
aye.
Any other comment?
Oh, sorry, just one from myself.
Tēnā koe huriwai.
I think the only part that we may need to factor in to recommendation C is when we would need to come back, just noting that as per the terms of reference, I mean, the meetings are set to be either bi-monthly or quarterly, and at the moment the terms of reference is only for the next 12 months. And I think whilst the first meeting would have occurred last week, the next one is a special meeting, I believe, due next month. So I think we'd need to come back to, we'd need to have put ourselves on to account and say when we will be able to advise of who from our manawhenua representation would be on that particular think tank, just so that we can kind of be able to front foot the think tank's co-design.
Kia ora, Hirawai, Chris here. Essentially, we're going through a bit of a staged process to stand up the think tank. So we went out for expressions of interest, the community, and have just assessed 51 applications and narrowed that down. We got the shortlisted people together to confirm their interest. That was the first meeting. We are here today seeking manawhenua appointment to the think tank, and we are yet to go through a process to appoint 2 community board members as well. So those last 2 steps will sort of be coming through hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We have put a meeting in the diary for the 10th of November, I believe, and that will be technically the first official meeting where we will be starting to discuss the scope and priorities and principles that we might want to focus on for that climate change and resilience strategy. And then after that, it would be quarterly. So we'll be rolling into next year essentially.
And sorry, just following on that particular one around the 51 also, applicants, was it at all, or is it at all possible based on what came in to identify who from that group, even if it's sort of names potentially, could be shared with the manawhenua, the Confederation, just so that we can sort of see who we could potentially appoint as our manawhenua reps, if any of them have sort of self-identified as being from any of the 3 iwi?
We can absolutely share the list. There was one person on the list who'd identified with a link to manawhenua. So, and it may be that others didn't identify, and it may be that you pick that up, but we're happy to do that to make sure that we're supporting you to identify appropriate people.
Thank you.
So I'll put recommendations A, B, and C, noting those amendments, being moved by myself and seconded by Kim. All in favour say aye. Contrary? We'll declare it carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll seek direction from the meeting. I'd like to ask if we could promote item 9, particularly 9.1 on our agenda. Are we comfortable to take that item now? And if we are, then I would welcome Glenn and Sean. This is found on page 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's the title of the update reflects Glenn is here today to give you an update on the background behind the proposed renaming of the old State Highway 1 as part of transferring that road back across to council as a local road. There is a process associated with that with regard to renaming it. So I'll hand over to Glenn and he'll run through there's a presentation that we'd like to give you today on that. And today is really just to inform you as to where that process had got to previously, and Glenn will run through the background. And happy to take any questions, I think at the end of the presentation, possibly, Glenn, if that's... Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sean. Happy to take questions at the end of the presentation, please. There is a few slides that link in and address some of the earlier items as we go through. So the briefing purpose, as Sean indicated, just to discuss the background around the renaming of Old State Highway 1, discuss the 7-section approach that was used and the potential names for each section, and then discuss the process from here. Way back in 2017, Mackay's to Peka Peka, M2PP as we shortened it, opened, so the expressway. Once revocation of the old State Highway, and that's from Poplar Road right through to Peka Peka, to the roundabout at Peka Peka there. Once revocation is completed later this calendar year, Whakaminenga, previously known as NZTA, will transfer the ownership and the responsibility for what was a state highway to council as a local road. And revocation is a formal process which transfers the state highway designation, and that's likely to happen later this calendar year. Once a state highway has been revoked, the name state highway cannot be used for address purposes, so you can't have a state highway that's not a state highway. Changes to any addresses on the old state highway cannot be made until it's revocated to council, it being the old state highway. Way back in 2015, the old state highway renaming process commenced, and that involved extensive discussion and consultation, including with councillors, community board, this table, community and many government agencies. Some of the key timelines and actions. 2016, the elected members were briefed, including on the 7-section approach, and I've got a slide that details what the 7-section approach is coming up, and retaining Amoia and Rumataka street names. This table was briefed and asked for a working party comprising representatives and a local historian to research potential names for Old State Highway 1 that were representative of our district's cultural and social history. And that working party report is appended to the agenda that went out today. Council confirmed a council-led process with a 7-section approach, but it recognised the role of the community boards to consult with their communities. The working party reported back with their recommended names. In 2017, the community boards and this forum was updated, and council invited the community to have their say on names for the 7 sections of the old state highway, including names proposed by the working party. Later that same year, the renaming process was put on hold. Last year, State Highway 1 from Paikakariki to Mackay's Crossing, and we know it as Section 1, was not actually revoked by Waka Kotahi, and it was renamed State Highway 59. So that section, which we know as Section 1, retained its State Highway designation and was called State Highway 59. In 2022, Pika Pika to Otaki, the expressway, and again being shortened to PP20, was opened, and the renaming process was started this year with a briefing and a briefing to council last week. So the slide up there shows the 7 sections, and Section 1, the southern section in yellow, is the section that doesn't need renaming because it's remaining as a state highway. Section 2, Poplar Avenue through to Kāpiti Road. Section 3, Paraparaumu North to Waikanae River. Section 4 is what we've called Waikanae Town. So that's essentially from the river through to Hemi Street, and that's where you go out of the developed area into the more undeveloped area. Section 6, the lighter blue colour, is Section 5, Waikanae to Pika Pika. So that's from Hemi Street up over the expressway and down to the roundabout on Pika Pika Road. Section 6 is what's loosely called at the moment Hadfield Road Connection, and that's a short little stub road, I suppose I call it, as you come down off the highway and exit off the expressway. And then Section 7 was a small section from Pika Pika Road, the roundabout, through to Te Kowhai Road, and I'll talk about that section in a minute. So those are the 7 sections that was identified back in 2016. These 7 sections typically reflect the current demarcations of Old State Highway 1, such as Main Road South, Main Road North, Main Road. Using 7 sections for a naming purpose would largely allow current house numbering to be retained. So because it reflects what is currently happening from a numbering point of view, it largely allows current house numbering to be retained. There will be some changes though. The renaming process is required to consider guidance from, amongst others, LINZ and New Zealand and Australia standards. And the road naming standards have evolved to ensure where possible that there's minimal duplication, so that there's not a main road south, main road north, south main road in one district. So that if there is a road, there is one road that sounds the same within a district or a city. And that's amongst other reasons for emergency services, so that if people need to call an ambulance to their house, it minimises the confusion of someone saying Main Street in the north of the district versus Main Road in the south of our district, for example. The standards are also put together by a wide range of experts, working groups and professionals, including FENS, so Foreign Emergency, have input from a naming point of view also. Last bullet point on the slide there, giving Old State Highway 1 continuous name, so starting, for argument's sake, at Poplar Ave and going right through to Te Kowhai Road, would mean renumbering and renaming over 1,000 properties. Pika Pika to Otaki, PP20. Planning for the revocation of PP20 is underway. And that's important because Section 7, and again that's from Pika Pika Road to Te Kowhai Road, is now part of a longer continuous section of Old State Highway 1 all the way to at least Otaki. One road name may be appropriate for this section to say the Otaki River. So proposing that renaming Section 7 is undertaken as part of a future Old State Highway PP20 renaming process. When the 7 sections was decided on 6 or 7 years ago, that Section 7 was a distinct small section of road. Now it is part of a longer continuous section of road. The Working Party agreed on one name for each of the 7 sections. and their report provides background about each of the names' historical and cultural significance, and importantly, the relationship that these names have with the local area. And up there are the seven sections, and the names that were proposed by the working party. Earlier this year, Council passed a resolution to cease work on Te Urihi. As part of that resolution, the middle bullet point on the screen stated that Council's aspirations include provide opportunity for manawhenua stories to be told in an integrated and visible and mana enhancing way. Adopting the working party's names would help deliver the aspirations of this resolution. The community boards in 2016, after engaging with their communities, reported back their preferred proposed names, and again they're up on the screen there. Renaming Old State Highway 1 is complex. In 2016, there was 227 properties along State Highway 1 that would be affected by any road and or numbering change, so there will be impacts to people. As we talked about earlier, revoking Old State Highway means it can no longer be called a state highway. Sections 3, 5 and 7 have state highway addresses. Sections of the old state highway have different names, including Main Road South, Main Road North, etc. Often the same set of highway has different names. It has a popular name and a name that's used for identification purposes. And again, reiterating that 7 sections largely reflects the existing numbering and mostly enables residents to keep the same street numbers. When Council went out to engage with our community, we got a great deal of submissions, 1,077 submissions, and which is, for example, well over twice what we got when we recently engaged on the speed limit reviews across our district. Just reading some of those bullet points, 61 of those submissions did not suggest a name and gave general comments. 68 of those submitters were identified as living on Old State Highway 1. Over 100 asked for the current names to be retained. Almost 300 were in favour of one name for Old State Highway 1. Over 500 identified names for sections of Old State Highway 1. And 58 were in support of the working party's names. So no common thread through those extensive submissions. And there's a table that just goes through and identifies the public submissions, what had the highest support, second highest support, third highest support, and picking out one there. For example, section 3 had strong support for Southwood's family names, and they had 29 submissions in favour. Main Road North had 22, for example. Preferred names from the submissions, the 7 sections, again, section 1 no longer needs renaming. Section 2, the submissions preferred Main Road South, and I referred to the LINZ standard earlier on, the standard. Main Road South, Main Road North are not in accordance with the standard. And that's, you can have a name Main Road and you can have a name Main Street, but South and North after the road or street is not a recognised name from a naming convention. Section 4, the preferred name was Main Road, and note that there is already a main street in Aotearoa. So from a naming convention, it's not in accordance with the standard. Section 5 was Main Road, and it was about extending Main Road to also cover Section 5, and that would involve more renumbering. Funding funding for renaming. As part of the revocation process way back in 2016, around $150,000 was provided by Whakaminenga for the renaming process, and that has been used. There is no further funding has been allocated for the renaming. It expected that the costs of renaming will range somewhere between 50 and 150k plus, depending on the process followed. Okay, next steps. So the briefing today. After the briefing today, confirming with Lynn's any areas that are raised that need confirmation in a road naming confirmation. A paper to council, including noting that Section 1 no longer requires renaming, and recommending that Section 7 is undertaken as a future renaming process. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, just a point of clarity, actually. Dan, you mentioned in the submission process that there was 286 applicants that referred to just having one long street name. I was just wondering, in the process last time, in the document that went out, was there actually a specific question whether there was a preference for one long name or multiple names? Was that question actually an identified question in the... I know it was before my time, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure, I can't recall.
Oh, okay. I'm assuming the documents may be within our information somewhere, we can more likely track it down. I'll just be interested.
Certainly the consultation processes we typically undertake here allow an opportunity to make general comments.
Oh, appreciate
so
that.
If the specific questions aren't asked, certainly people are encouraged to note their comments, questions or other concerns.
No, I appreciate that, it's just a curiosity.
Councillor Coe.
Yes, good morning. We just did discuss this at the meeting the other day, and of course there's been some public commentary following that meeting, but this is a very contentious issue, and I believe the reason that the naming process was halted back in 2017 was due to the degree of contention in the public domain. And is that correct?
I guess that the primary reason back then was the delegation to set the name actually sat with the owner of the road. So until it was revoked, the council basically did not have the ability to change the name at the time. So the decision was made to wait until that process was completed before actually going through that process.
Just am wondering whether we have conflicting objectives here, because I fully acknowledge the need to recognise people that have gone before us and to allow manawhenua history to be told. I'm just wondering whether that objective is perhaps in conflict with the objectives of naming roads, which a road name has a very practical purpose, which is to allow mail to be directed and allow emergency services to locate people in need of an emergency response. And I'm just wondering whether those two purposes are somewhat at odds with each other, and whether there are different and perhaps superior ways of acknowledging the contributions from those who have gone before us. I'm a very big fan of heritage and so on, and I believe the stories that have been put together by the Working Party are beautiful stories that deserve should we say, a more respectful approach than simply naming a road. And I'm just wondering how we can resolve this in a way that the community feels that there is an acceptable solution.
I can maybe try and answer that. I don't know if, from an officer's perspective, I think the first question with regard to that, two different purposes or conflicting purposes around naming. Certainly the policy that we have at the moment and the process that we have used for a number of years in terms of new subdivisions certainly specifically references the need to consider manawhenua in that process. And it is, obviously, as the district's grown, it is a regular occurrence where through that process that we do have Māori names put into that mix and historical names that are referenced through that to, I guess, provide for that purpose of identifying a street in a new subdivision and meeting the requirements of the LINs, the legislation that specifies how we do that. So I don't necessarily see there being I guess from a staff's perspective, see that being a significant issue. I don't know if there was another question there in terms of how we manage this process. I guess obviously staff are recommending an approach and tabling that with council. Ultimately, I guess is the governance role of the organisation to either endorse that or suggest an alternative mechanism for carrying out that function.
If I could perhaps provide some context. First of all, I think Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti should respectfully, first of all, acknowledge the work of our whanaunga who took on the responsibility in the previous triennium to undertake this work. That's the first thing that I think needs to be recognised. And the second thing is really that I don't imagine that my great-great-grandfather and my great-great-grandmother's names would be put forward without thinking about the practicality of applying those names to a street. The information that has been generated by the panel, I think, needs to be taken in the right context, that we are talking about significant rangatira of the Confederation of Ngāti Toa, Tatiawa and Ngāti Raukawa. To consciously consider using their names is not an easy decision to make. And the respect that requires and the acknowledgement that requires is not what I'm seeing or hearing. And the integrity of those three individuals who were tasked with that responsibility, I know, are very much aware of the reputations that they have and the responsibilities that they carried to engage with our people to determine whether or not we felt it was appropriate, it was safe for those tupuna rangatira to be identified. And I want to respectfully acknowledge their work to qualify their significance, their importance to this community that we belong to. And there are always reservations about whether or not it is safe to promote our tupuna when we're not the type of people that will self-promote. I'm thinking about the national highway that now creates accessibility through Aotearoa. The naming of those two significant motorways that link porirua te wharero. Wharero o te Otaki carry the names of two significant rangatira. So this is not insignificant what we're being asked to consider. It's consistent with the brave steps that we have taken as a community to acknowledge those rangatira and all that they represent. If it were not for them, we wouldn't be here. I'm conscious of the fact that on most days when I travel through to Takapuahia, I've said this before, I have a karakia along that expressway when I get to Takamore, because I know that I'm driving across Wahitapu. And I continue to have a karakia for my safety and welfare and those other people commuting along that motorway because of that. So there's a deeper significance to us, first of all, considering the significant tupuna that we are wanting to identify. And with that comes all of the important principles that they reflected and they represented that will embrace us as a community. And if that can be considered as part of the decision-making process that we are considering today, then I'm sure we will reach a respectful outcome. Sadly, what would be the complete reverse of that potential is for consultation to happen again within the Confederation and a decision being made to withdraw those names that have been recommended, and the possibility of that becoming a future reality for this council. And I say that with the deepest respect because I do understand the complexity and the views that express that, reflect that. But I'm recommending that, first of all, through Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti, who represents the interests of our Art Confederation, that we consciously consider going back to those three rangatira and acknowledging the work that they did, that we provide the opportunity for them to know that this take is back on the table. We seek their advice. We consider whether there is a need for any further internal consultation, and then we bring that back to the table. And I think we can achieve that relatively quickly, but I'm happy to open the conversation wider at the meeting today so there's real clarity, particularly from our manawhenua representatives, about the most appropriate approach that we should take here. And I do want to insist that Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti are very clear about the views that you have regarding this matter, because it is a decision that we do need to make in partnership with our treaty partner. And we need to be well informed to reach an outcome that is deserving of those tupuna whose names have been put forward for us to embrace and to acknowledge and to respect.
You got any questions? Oh, kia ora. Just a couple of questions. So, in terms of, because I heard Councillor Coe mention practicality of the names for services and stuff like that. So, would that have to be, would that have been discussed during the process of deciding how many sections to have and what names to have? Would that have been a consideration?
Yes, it would have been one of the considerations.
Okay. I've got a couple more. So, the 7 sections you mentioned in there, it's largely would allow the current numbering to stay as it is, ultimately driving down the costs and all the benefits that come from that. So is there any other reasons, apart from that, why 7 sections is the recommendation? Is there other driving factors to that?
From a road naming point of view, it's important to have distinct starts and stops of a road name, so that if you come to a major intersection, and Kāpiti Road would be one, you're at a major intersection, it's possible or likely that a road name could change. Another one as you head into Waikanae, as you go across the river, a road would change. So the 7 sections from a road naming point of view lends itself to that approach.
Yeah. And just on talking about next steps, so next steps are obviously this goes to council and there's a vote. And given it's a contentious subject, what does that, so if it goes through, obviously it goes through, but if it does not go through, what does that trigger? Where do we go from there?
As an officer, I'd let council make that decision.
Okay. So that will be directed, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, well, I guess in theory, the current state highway, the names that they apply at the moment have been in place. The expressway opened, I think, 2017. So the issue would be, I guess, in terms of timing, and you can't, having Old State Highway 1, which I think is one of the current names, not a good idea to continue with something that you know is not, certainly not in accordance with the specifications in terms of LINs. And we have had a number of residents along the highway requesting that their name is changed to something. There are existing dwellings on the highway that have problems at the moment with mail and with actual problems with the nature of, because they're called Old State Highway and you've got the New State Highway, there's ongoing issues there for some of them. And they have problems with emergency service access. Just recently with the recent briefing we've had contact from one resident that says, look, can you get on with the change because of that issue? So if we didn't make a decision, you'd continue to be in that place where you've got problems for some people in terms of access, and you've got names that don't really make sense when you look at them in regard to the standard and what you might expect that road to be called.
And just last question, how many street names are in Te Reo around Kāpiti? Do you know? So we have some though, eh? Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the exact number, no, sorry, but there are a number, and
do they cause issue for services and things like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Great.
And
Cool.
and again, before any name is allocated to a road or a street, it does need to go through LINs.
Yeah.
And they clarify that it's an okay name and it's not confusing.
Great. Yep, that's all my questions.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, just want to acknowledge a kōrero that you've just given, Andre, with regards to understandings with the names. It's much appreciated. We weren't part of even the last triennium, we weren't a part of that process. It was actually the triennium before that. So this has been going on for quite a long time. I really just want to ask an opinion of Te Whakaminenga or some consideration around one issue. And that really revolves around the either the having 7 sections or just having one section or one name, regardless of what's been done in the past and regardless of the names, and no disrespect to any of that. From a governance perspective, I think one of the questions we'll be asking is, do we have 7 sections or do we have one, regardless of the name? And that sort of stuff. We'd be very interested in knowing Te Whakaminenga's perspective on that. Doesn't have to be right this minute as such, but if consideration could be given for that question, I think would be much appreciated to be fed into the process that we have. And just making you aware, we've only had a similar briefing to the one that's just been had here, so we're at the beginning of this process, although a lot of work has been done in this space as well. That's just one of the burning questions I think that would need to be answered. That's going to be one from a governance perspective that I think there's going to be a lot of interest in, and having a understanding of where this table sits on that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou. Ai tautoko anau I ngā mihi, kua mahia, kia koe koro, kia koe Andre. e mihi ana. O te rā e mihi ana ki a tātou katoa e noho ana ki te kōkiri ai nei kaupapa i tēnei rā. Thanks, Glenn, for coming and sharing this information with us today. I'd like to just support the sentiments that Andre has conveyed to the group. This did come to us, I'm not sure of the year it came, but quite a while ago, and we had a discussion about it back then, and some of the feedback we gave was that the street naming is really important to us. We have a lot of street names and statues and memorials around the country, and quite a lot of them are names and ancestors or people that many of our people don't really resonate with. The names are quite foreign to us. There's a sense that our rangatahi can feel like this is a different place when there's lots of names that you don't recognise or you don't know about. You know, walking through the middle of Wellington is a good example. And yeah, really, there's not enough of our tūpuna acknowledged in these ways. And yeah, I was quite interested to hear, Liz, that you thought there are different and more superior ways of acknowledging the history of our tūpuna, or these tūpuna that are mentioned in the report today. I mean, in another forum or method, it would be good to hear about those other ways. I think it's still important to have them acknowledged in this way. I've heard some comments. I haven't heard about everything that happened in the discussion about this or the contentious issues that are going on, but there was someone's mentioned people might have difficulty saying these names, and you know, it's pretty important to address that. If we're thinking about where we're wanting to go in the society and that we're wanting to create for the future, and yeah, that can go both ways, you know. There's 3 official languages in this country, and you know, it's fair to say that a lot of people have difficulty pronouncing some Māori words, and we struggle with that. Potentially the people that are mispronouncing things are struggling with it too, and I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years in that space. If you can look at the presenters on television that have been able to learn and pronounce names correctly, it's a really good example of where there's a willingness and some effort put into it, you can say words as they should be said. And there's just an assumption there that this is only about Māori words. I don't know why we don't have these issues with all these English words, but we actually have a lot of our rangatahi coming through kohanga and kura Māori education systems that struggle with these English names of street names that we have. And that doesn't seem to be such an issue when people are talking about issues with people being able to say a Māori word. So, you know, it feels uncomfortable when you hear that sort of statement when it's an official language. So it really shouldn't be part of the discussion, I guess, about these street names, is where I'm going to with this. I will respond to your question, Martin, about the one name or one section for one name for the whole area, or different sections, different names for the different sections. And I don't know, it seems a bit of a moot point when we've heard today about the practicalities of it. Having it broken up into sections, and then, you know, people that live in that area. I've lived in a street where practically the whole town had that street name, and it is an issue when it's just one name for a big, long, massive street. It will be an issue for posties and emergency services, and even just the general public when you're trying to go somewhere on the street not knowing where it is. So for practical reasons, it seems useful to have it broken up into sections. Yeah, that was the main points I wanted to say. Just that having our history and tupuna acknowledged with street names helps to bring that history back into the foreground and give a sense of connection for us, and I hope for everyone in the community actually. And might just share with you that in Otaki we're doing a project to research some of the tupuna or events or facts of interest about some of the street names, in order to create storyboards, have those online, and hopefully also physically on the streets, and or a QR code so that people can look up that information about those tupuna or events quite easily. So having that name there and a way in which people can easily access the information is pretty helpful. We think it can help bring a good sense of connection for everyone in the community. So that might be a next step. And yeah, keen to hear what is the process now. Like, looks like this has come for our information, and then what is going to happen next about this. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Kirsten. E whakamārama nau tō kōrero e puta atu kia tātou e huitahi nei tēnei rangi, nei rāta mihi.
Did you want to go to Huriwai online?
I'll go to Huriwai online, thank you.
Kia ora. Oh, sorry, can everyone hear me? Oh, sorry, no, that's right. I'm putting on my headphones because my wife is having a complete ABBA moment, so she's just blasting the ABBA sounds next door to me. So if you do hear it filtering through, it's because it's being blasted at the other end of the house. I do sort of want to, sort of acknowledging staff for bringing in this update. I think it's sort of noting everyone's comments. This will be something that I think will be quite a contentious matter going forward once it actually gets to council for the final vote. I think from my particular perspective, I guess my key sort of takeaway points here is that this opportunity, especially in this particular part, because name changing will always raise contentions in the community. Some will just say, why bother? Don't fix what's not broken, in their view, and others will just say waste of time, whatnot. But I think this also shows an opportunity for council, for KCDC, really to sort of further cement and promote its 30-year partnership that they have with manawhenua, especially using this as an opportunity to sort of like further show that courage and leadership in our community. I think to Councillor Coe's points, I'm actually quite keen as well to investigate how the richness of our history in the rohe can be promoted further. I mean, street names are one thing, like particularly for myself living in Waikanae, it's always nice to see tupuna names. And I mean, in my mind, I understand how they're connected to each other, but for those who are not from the region or who don't understand how those names are related to each other, maybe there is something that we can further investigate around, whether it's a QR code or some sort of augmented reality thing that when people are going for either walks or when the Northern Explorer is going through via train, you know, these ways in which our history of our region can be promoted and visibly put in front of everyone. Yeah, so I'd actually be sort of keen to see how that could work, and then how that would feed into actions relating to our cultural, environmental, and sort of economic development objectives for council. And I think sort of thirdly, the point around is that especially there will always be a degree of ignorance, and it is what it is. But I think the more we can better engage with the community and get them on board with the idea, you know, like why it is that these are the names being put forward and sort of show the richness of that history, I think we would actually be able to win more people, and just sort of get the wider buy-in, because yeah, I do have some reservations where, you know, you see tupuna names going up and then you see everyone in the community either just butchering the name or you know, just actively opposing it, and sometimes I do wonder how much of that sentiment can be mitigated or can be addressed through, you know, ongoing engagement with the community. But yeah, so that's sort of the takeaway points for me so far.
Tēnā koe Huri Wai, valuable contribution to our kōrero today. Appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, kia ora, Andre. I'm grateful to your suggestion of going back to the Working Party, who worked really hard to pull this information together, and yeah, it was desperately unfortunate what happened with the narrative around this being one road being split into 7 sections, which wasn't true. Some of the resistance to some of the names, which was also really upsetting for some of us as councillors actually at the time. So bringing this back is a hard thing to do, and what I'd like to see us do is stop presenting what we presented before and present something which reflects the mana of those names and which reflects some of the feedback that we got, and tries to simplify things as much as possible. Because the main thing people said was that it was confusing. And I've been staring at this map in the presentation, and I think I've finally got my head around it. And to me, it's started to become clear that there are 3 sections that need to be renamed in their existing forms. One is Main Road South, because you can't have Main Road South. One is Main Road North / State Highway 1. And the other one is State Highway 1 north of Waikanae. That's 3 sections. So we can stop talking about 7 sections straight away. I'm discarding the one that doesn't need to be renamed because it's not being revoked. And I'm also discarding what we call the stump road, because it's quite peripheral and should be part of a different discussion. It's not. It's actually to the side. So other than that, the other 3 are Amohia Street, which has businesses on it. So that's why it was proposed to be retained. Then the next bit is Rimataka, which can be kept. So that's 2 gone. So that's 3 gone actually. The one that doesn't need to be renamed, the 2 that are staying the same. And then we've got Main Road in Waikanae. Now the only reason I've heard that that has to be renamed, or that it should be renamed, is that there's a main road in Otaki. But I think it's actually pretty easy to say Main Road Waikanae or Main Road Otaki. So it actually doesn't need to be renamed. Potentially it's a nice opportunity to rename it, but there are also lots of businesses along there who have put up with years and years of roadworks. So we would have a good reason to say we're not going to change your address now at the same time when we don't absolutely have to. So we're left with these three sections. One is Poplar Ave to Kāpiti Road, which is now Main Road South. Then the next one is Main Road North, which takes you from the end of Remataka through to Waikanae. And then there's north of Waikanae to what's currently called the Hadfield Link Road, and it might even be able to keep its name. So we could go back saying, we're only going to name what we have to rename, because we're aware that people have been through years and years of disruption around this. So we've got three names, and we could go back to the Working Party and ask them which three names that you came up, that you identified would be appropriate for those three sections. That's just a suggestion. It simplifies it, it maintains the mana of the work that's been done, and it also acknowledges the years of uncertainty that have happened around this. And it just reframes the discussion into something that could potentially be a positive discussion about three beautiful new names for three beautiful sections of road. Just an idea.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank everyone for the kōrero that we've just had today. I've just found it very, very interesting, very, very enlightening, very informative. It's certainly information I can take back with regards to decision-making processes as such as well. Janet, you bring up a very interesting approach as well, and that sort of stuff. So we've got a lot of things to talk about with regards to that. But I just wanted to say I really appreciated the input and your views and thoughts on things. I found it really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I just wish to respond to the two people that mentioned doing more around our heritage and promoting that. As the mover of the motion around trying to, finding ways to allocate funding to tell the manawhenua story, I just wish to state that that is a very clear ambition of mine, and I am seeking to find ways to do that and to find budget for that, particularly in the long-term plan. So I just want to reiterate that. Secondly, I wish to note that I personally have no objection to a name, to names in Te Reo for the roads. I do believe there is an issue in the community, and I do believe also that we have to, then there could be some room for compromise in terms of which name in Te Reo is used. I have informally made a suggestion to a number of people that we use the name Te Horonui, reflecting the fact that whales used to travel down the coastline, and that is the whaling side of things. Whales are very important to our history, and to have a single name of Te Horonui would reflect that history and also link into the possibility of whale song, and it also potentially has some benefits in terms of the tourism aspects of Kāpiti, economic development, that we can create a story around whales in our area. I realise I'm just saying that is very much a personal view, and I am just informally seeking opinions on that proposal from a number of people to see how it sounds. And so far I have had a very, very positive response to that suggestion of Te Horonui. To me, that is a compromise way forward. It doesn't obviously acknowledge the tupuna, and we do need to find ways of doing that through, and there's lots of ways we can do that through our built facilities, through QR codes, for whatever. As I say, I'm very keen to tell the very rich history of this area. So I do hope that in the comments that have been published in the media that you have not misconstrued my views on these things. That was a very unfortunate experience where the media kind of blew things out of proportion. I have as I say, I have no objection to names in Te Reo. I am just wishing to acknowledge concerns that have been raised in the community. And I have been, I've had lots of emails come through to me on this topic. It is very contentious. It needs to be dealt with very, very carefully because it's the sort of thing that if that could backfire, shall we say, in terms of people being taken down a pathway where there is resistance. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. I just had a comment about the main road thing. Yeah, and there is a. I live on Iti Street in Otaki, and I keep getting these letters for Iti Street in Whakatane, even though it's got Whakatane and the postcode on these letters. So it's just a comment actually, and my auntie lives on a street in Lower Hutt, and she gets letters, with the postcodes on it, this from other areas, and it hasn't been sorted out yet with NZ Post. I don't know how and why that happens, but it could still be an issue for the post. I imagine it's not such a big issue for emergency services because they're talking. But if you go down a track of doing that, sort of figuring those things out, yeah, it's good to sort out all of those names that might get confused with other places. That's all. And yeah, keen to hear, I don't know if I've fully heard what happens next. Kind of hearing it goes back to council for a vote and then what? Thanks.
So I heard that the next step is for the chair to go and talk to the working group. You, in terms of the main road, if you wanted to rename that, there could be one section, and that came through in the submissions, that incorporates what's currently Main Road and Old State Highway 1, which is sections 4 and 5, and then you'd still only have 3. That's just another thought.
Yeah, with the agreement of this meeting today, I think respectfully, I just want to be satisfied that those 3 rangatira that initiated this work are aware, first of all, that this take has come back to the table. I think respectfully we should do that, and would be comfortable for them to provide their current views on how we might navigate this matter. I think the investment that they've made has been significant. I'm certainly aware of the contribution that Rāwhiti Heket made during the course of his time on the governance with Tatiawa ki Whakarongotai. So the first thing I thought was that respectfully, we should go back to them and say, this take is back on the table. First of all, I want to acknowledge all the great work that you did, the consultation that you undertook with our people, being brave to promote these names of our tupuna, of our rangatira, at the time for the purposes of having to rename. And then from there, I'm encouraging our Art Confederation to also do due diligence here, to consider the view that you might reach following the presentation of the update today from Glenn. And so I acknowledge the work that you've done, Glenn, to help simplify what appears to be somewhat of a complex take, which doesn't carry my agreement. It's important that we have this discussion. It's important that we have this discussion as rangatira of this council. That's how I regard you as elected members. That's how I view our participation at the council table under our current partnership structure. And if we're going to have constructive conversations, then all views should be respected. I appreciate you sharing with us, Liz, the conversation and the noise outside of this room. I'm not aware of that. I'm actually not even interested in that. This is where the take needs to be discussed. This is where the decision ultimately will be made. And the reference to simplifying things by having a whale swimming along our motorway or our street is a new concept for me. When we know very well the relationship that we have with those tohora is out there in Rokawa Moana, and we have done during the course of all their migrations over many, many hundreds of years. So as long as the conversation is respectful and acknowledges those rangatira who our people were brave enough to put forward, then I believe if we can maintain the integrity of that, we then maintain our reputations and the responsibilities that we carry to reach an ultimate decision that's best for this community. So I appreciate the input today. It's important that this take came back to this table so we can exercise our responsibility as manawhenua representatives to give this the due diligence that it deserves. And that will mean going back and having kōrero of our kaumātua, and particularly those three rangatira that put their hand up and said, yes, we will pick this take up and we'll do our best to respond to the need to look at renaming streets in our district. And the manner in which they have provided that information makes me feel very proud and very honoured that we're having this conversation and that we are willing to consider how we want to reflect our treaty partnership. And it's not a new experience for us. In my mind, and it's probably a biased opinion, again, as a very, very young local authority, I think we do some great things to reflect the partnership that we have and the responsibility to that piece of paper up there to ensure that our tino rangatiratanga is expressed, our kaitakitanga is expressed, and we could do that in partnership with safety and respect and honour. So, Kirsten, I just hear your request to ensure we've got a clear understanding of timeframes. I would hope that through the support of staff today, our minutes will reflect the important outcomes that we will conclude from this briefing. That should include timeframes that will note the process that Council is needing to adopt and follow in order to progress this matter. So, does that answer it for you, or do we need further clarity from today's meeting?
I guess I was sort of wondering what happens after it goes to council, more so than going back and talking to the working party. And just something to add, if we're going to be going back and talking to the working group, I hear you talking about an emphasis on talking to the three iwi representatives on the working party. It would be good to also talk to Anthony Drever, who was on the working party, and get their collective response. Yeah, be keen to hear what he thinks as well. But yeah, sounds like a good approach. Tēnā tātou.
Sorry, I was just going to add in terms of process, the old highway will be revoked potentially by the end of next month, November. But then again, in terms of the process after that, then it is really with council in terms of time frame. So I don't see any problem at all waiting for further input and that kōrero with the working group to then come back and inform a decision that then would go to council at some point, possibly in the new year. I suggest the time frames we're talking about at the moment, but again, I don't see that as being an issue.
Well, again, just forecasting is a significant date that's in front of us in February 2024. And so that needs to be an opportunity to commemorate and celebrate the partnership we share. And what is it that we can use to reflect on the work that has been undertaken in partnership by this local authority and the three manawhenua that have had a significant responsibility for looking after our district for a number of years now. So February 24 might be a great opportunity to reflect on the work that we're doing together and those things that we have successfully achieved. I'll seek direction again from the meeting. Could I again take the liberty perhaps of pushing us on to item 9.2? I'm just aware of our team that are here with us. So if there's no objection to that, could I extend a welcome to Stephen, and again, Chris, you'll be helping support this, and who else do we have? And Darren. And while doing that, thank you, Sean, and thank you, Glenn, for your update. And Jen. And Jen, welcome. Old Persons Housing Review.
Kia ora, I'm Stephen Gross, I'm the Housing Program Manager with Council. We're tabling an update today on the review of older persons housing. So we've prepared this report to update you on the progress of this action, which is identified in the housing strategy, and particularly the presentation of a stage 1 report that we've attached as an appendix. I think what we're particularly interested in as well is just pointing out the outcomes of the phase 1 report, which is focused on the current operation of the council's 118 unit older persons housing portfolio. The review is very focused on the settings and policies to ensure that in the future we can encourage growth in the portfolio. And some of the issues we've identified in the phase 1 report that I'd welcome discussion concerns the current allocation system and how we can encourage interaction with kaumātua and to identify a housing need in the region and to provide more housing. Another issue that's identified in the report is the lack of completely accessible units within the portfolio. None of the units are actually totally wheelchair accessible.
Sorry, if I might add, today we are sharing with you the review findings. There's a second phase to this, which we'll be looking at, so what do you do with that? And what are our next steps? So when you look at the findings, you may well have some thoughts that you want to put on the table, and we would welcome those today or at other times as well. So I just want to note we're not leaving the review findings here and going, they look great, because they don't. We're going to do something with it. But today, we just want to share what we've found, because there are some issues. And that's not to at all undermine, I think, the work that has been done to get us to where we are today. But the reality is, we need to take that next step up. There's an opportunity to make sure that we identify those gaps and we do better. So I just wanted to note that as well.
Just a quick question. So you mentioned in the report talking about accessibility, wheelchair access and the like, and the fact that just ensuring that people are actually applying. I think there was something in there about how they're applying for these houses. And we mentioned in Otaki that sometimes people don't even apply because they just don't even think they're going to get one. And I don't know if it's in the scope of this report, but my question is around wraparound services. So working with manawhenua, can we consider working with manawhenua in terms of wraparound services to make the whole package of the housing more I would say enticing, or something that not just the actual construction of the buildings, but because what we find is it's that those little mini communities, and it's been able to access wraparound services and bring them to their door that really adds to the whole well-being of the entire complex, rather than just what the building looks like. Can you get a wheelchair up it? Yeah.
Yes, I think that the issues that have been identified present opportunities to improve the service, but also the allocation system and so forth. But yes, wraparound services are very important and need to be factored into the review.
Darren Grant from the Strategic Development Director. Definitely in terms of the options that we're looking in terms of stage 2, part of that is the best way to deliver that. And I think, some of the things that we're looking at is, the ability to have an independent provider of the units going forward. And how do they work with different service providers to make sure that there is a complete offer there? Because that would be part of, if we were looking to access government funding, that would be part of the requirements of that also, sort of thing. And the feedback that we've had from the different sector providers is this is about creating a community, not just a building. And it's a really important factor in the whole makeup.
Huri wai, kōrero mai?
Kia ora, sorry. I haven't actually I've only just sort of read the documents, so a lot of my questions might actually already just be answered if I just paid close attention. But I was just wondering, Chris or one of the other staff, could you please walk me through the particular part in the exec summary on page 54 of the document where it talks about how councils are ineligible to receive, I'm not sure if it's both IRRS and OS funding or one or the other, and it's linked to the potential as an option going forward for KCDC to establish an affordable housing entity? Like, is that a workaround in order to receive the government funding to subsidise the rents for the housing portfolio? I'm just trying to figure out how structurally how does that all fit in together?
I feel like we'd almost say yes, but I'll let Stephen unpack that a bit more.
As you may be aware, the only organisations that can access the income-related rent subsidy are Kāinga or CHIPS, which are registered community housing providers. So local authorities are not able to become a CHIP, and they're also not able therefore to access income-related rent subsidy. So I'm sure when we present the options around the way forward, I'm sure there will be an option around the potential for a CHIP to be involved. We have a separate piece of work underway as well, looking at the potential to create a independent housing entity. And those two pieces of work are separate, but I think that they may come together when we start to consider what the options are.
Yeah, I might add to that, Hurawai, and say that this review and options and the affordable housing entity are running concurrently. But the thing that I think I'd put on the table, and I think the conversation we've got to date, is we can do better for our community by thinking about using an affordable housing entity and or working in partnership with others to deliver these services to the community. So because of the constraints that are in place for local councils and local authorities, it makes it harder to bring affordable social housing options to the table because we can't access those subsidies. We think it's an important thing to be backing though, and so we're wanting to put some options on the table about how do we move forward, and acknowledging that actually there's a lot of people already in this space, and there's opportunity to think about how we work together, and even the point that you've made come around actually, and the social services that go around this. It isn't just let's pop up a house, it's the how we're supporting the community in this space opportunity.
Oh no, thank you. Yeah, because I assume then that if that's the case, then the current criteria for council or to be eligible to apply into council housing or council-owned housing would not have to be the same criteria that would be applied through MSD's SAS list to get into their community housing, like as in like if CHIPS and KO look for a particular, those with the absolute, in their view, those with the most need into affordable housing, they have their parts. But then if council's ineligible for that, I assume you're then targeting the cohort of people between those that would generally be covered by CHIPS and those who can afford a market rental. So, those who cannot afford to get into the market rent, so need some sort of subsidy, but currently not eligible to get into the CHIP and KO space. Did I make sense?
Yeah, I think that really does highlight the kind of considerations you have to put into the different options in terms of being really clear who is the target group and who are we wanting to provide housing to.
I might add to that because I think what you're asking, Hirawai, is it's a great question. Is who are we targeting in the market presently? I think we are targeting a similar base as Kāinga Ora. It is just that we can't access the subsidies, and we are subsidising the rent from a council perspective at the moment, which is, I think, part of the challenge that we have and what we're trying to shift. So it means essentially that at the moment council is bearing, for want of better words, the burden of discounted rent for social housing. A shift to a different setup would mean that we could access those subsidies. So a central government would be carrying the weight of that if the subsidies come from there. In a nutshell, that's what I think we're putting on the table.
Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. And I don't know if this is the right forum to be bringing this conversation up, but I'm just interested from a kaumātua perspective and where that potentially sits with regards to iwi providing housing for Māori elderly. I don't know if we've picked this up in the report or anything, but is there a provision within iwi to be working in that space with regards to supplying, should we say, older person housing within your iwi as such? Or is there a partnership possibilities or anything along that sort of line?
Sorry, I could actually probably answer that particular question for you, South Councillor Halliday. So, because in my other portfolio I do work in the Ministry of Housing, but not in this particular space. But yes, so there is ability, and iwi do it all around the country, specifically looking at supporting kaumātua who are often single kaumātua who do not have the income or means to be able to go into a market rental. Yep. And so what they have done as iwi is for themselves to become a CHIP, or a community housing provider, and then through that mechanism they're then eligible to receive what we call a rental subsidy, or IRRS, as well as a OS, which is sort of just the ability to bring forward costs for operating over the lifetime of the contract. But yes, that's what they do based on what they're seeing out there in the country as the need, especially for a lot of kaumātua, like I said, who are single, and a lot of their kids are, moving elsewhere else, but they also still want to maintain their independence, but unable to afford market rentals. So yes, that is happening all around the country.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Just a couple of observations. I think it would be helpful if there was an ability to identify the demands, looking at the issues that you've identified, the demands that would reflect the expectations within the community of the district who are identifying as Māori. I'd like to know if it's possible to actually provide that identification. And the other point, just in terms of the presentation of the report, Could I just ask respectfully that there is tangata whenua considerations included in future reporting? And what that does is it immediately perhaps requires the authors or the those providing the report to Te Whakaminenga to engage with us. And what it will do then, of course, is promote a response or a reaction regarding the presentation of a report to this committee. And it then stimulates our need to consult across the Art Confederation. It's just finding consistency in the way in which our staff are reporting, not only to us, but also across all committees of council and council itself. So I look for that in this report, and I encourage you to include that in future reporting regarding this particular take. But I am particularly interested in knowing whether or not there is an understanding of what the demand looks like across the district in terms of those who identify their ethnicity as Māori. I can say that I'm aware of the opportunities that that Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai and Ngā Hapu in particular are pursuing as pre-settlement entity, as pre-settlement iwi. It's somewhat different with Ngāti Tō, where they have effectively their own housing department that are active and are able to provide for our families, our children, and kaumātua. Nevertheless, there are initiatives right now that I know are based on the ability to have land that could be made available and developed to provide housing, whether it's papakainga housing. I'm thinking of the Otaki Māori Racing Club, proposed housing development at this time. And then I'm also thinking in relation to Councillor Halliday's questions about the capacity for iwi to take a greater responsibility and control of this. There's also funding I know that we have at the present moment within Kāpiti that provides for upgrading of kaumātua homes. So we do have funding that Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai has for a separate project that kind of sits under the mana, the authority of Manaaki Kāpiti, to not only provide that clinical and health support, but we have a project where we have funding that's enabling us to improve the actual conditions of kaumātua and their homes. So I see a synergy there where council are wanting to acknowledge, from what's been reported today, the approach that we should take to improve the opportunities to house our older people. And then there's those other initiatives that I'm aware of that then looks at how can we continue to improve the conditions of their home, that then obviously improves their well-being, their hauora. So I see those things all being interrelated, and I want to just thank staff for providing the report to us today, and want to note those questions and comments that have been raised. And the last question I have is stage 2. Here we are today with the findings of stage 1. Could we perhaps get some insight, and this may be just my ignorance, in terms of timelining stage 2? I suspect that our representatives today will want to digest further what has been identified. But just noting that stage 2 of the review will consider alternative operating models. Great, let's see what they look like. But is there a time frame that we could note and record today so that when we generate the minutes from this meeting and the outcomes of this meeting, we've got a reference point for that?
So in terms of timeframes, first of all, yeah, so the stage 2 report is being worked on at the moment. We're due to report back to council in December in terms of, yeah. And I just thought I'd point out as well, in terms of the housing need, Council undertook a housing needs assessment in 2021, and it was quite comprehensive korero and community conversations looking to capture need. And definitely the needs of kaumātua and older persons was captured as a need, and a growing need in the district as well.
I might just add to that and say that this and the next steps will be bringing to the Kāpiti place-based steering group, so that there's, I guess, a better chance to have some broader wānanga around the options and what's coming forward. So I want to put that on the table as well. And just a note, our next meeting is on the 6th of November. So we'll be looking forward to sort of getting under the hood a bit with you on that.
I acknowledge the recommendation. B does help clarify stage 2, so that's my ignorance.
Oh, kia ora. As you know, housing is a big deal for us, and we see it as a priority. We've got Ngā Hapa Ōtaki has a draft housing strategy, and we're going to be receiving some funding pretty soon, which we're very grateful for, and it's going to allow us to get more into this mahi in the short term. Our housing strategy is pretty comprehensive, and it's going to take a long time to get a lot of the things done. As you know, it's a pretty complex area to get into, and we're looking at multiple sort of solutions across that whole spectrum. Ideally, kaumātua are, living close to their whānau, within sort of whānau groupings and close to all sorts of facilities that they need. One of the things that we've noted is, it's good if there are things that we can access quite quickly to bring some relief to some of our whānau that are needing some housing. And we've expressed to the team here at KCDC an interest in being able to manage the houses that are in Ōtaki, manage or have more input into who goes into them. And the other area that's sort of interest in this space is that some of our members have helpfully reminded us that typically Māori don't live as long as non-Māori, and so it would be worthwhile considering a way in which we might be able to access that housing at a younger age than 65. So we're keen to see that explored, considered, and how that might look like. We don't want to do it in a way that sort of is disallowing others, but, in a way that means that our people can access and get good use of these spaces, rather than possibly getting access at 65 and then not being able to use it for very long, unfortunately. Other than that, thank you for the information and update on how the work's going. Kia ora.
Are there any other comments or questions? Can I take us to the recommendations found on page 49? That we note the review of Older Persons Housing Strategy 1 report as attached as Appendix 1. That we note the key findings of the Council review of Older Persons Housing Stage 1 report and identified short-term opportunities with a separate report on findings from Stage 2, which is due to be presented in December 2023. Would someone like to move that, please? Those recommendations? Councillor Halliday. The seconder? Kim? Any further conversation?
Just want to thank council officers for coming and bringing the report. This is an ongoing piece of work. I've just looked up the Nahapu housing report, which I'm going to now flick through and read. And it's the stuff, so looking forward to see how that, and I'm ensuring that there's a relationship there, finding out a bit more about that, but also just getting an understanding of that report. But look, this is an area that we need to address in an ongoing way, and we are. In the last triennium, we did the high-level work that needed to be done. We're getting close to the rock face, so great to seeing the work that's being done to look after our elderly in our community, whatever that might look like. And looking forward to how this all progresses, very much so.
Yeah, just acknowledging the team, always trying to keep us up to date, and every step along the way. So there's a lot of meetings. So just thanks for that.
I'll put the motion and echo those sentiments. Thank you to Jen and Darren and Stephen and Chris, and appreciate the work that you're doing. All in favour say aye. Contrary, carried. I'm getting little whispers saying, can we have a break? So I'm going to announce it. We'll have a break.